In touring the USS Kidd today, it may help to remember its important place in history. Here's a quick history lesson. Remember the day, December 7th, 1941. While European powers were battling it out in what would eventually be called World War II, Japan decided to use the global diversion to launch a massive offensive.
The goal was to seize the rubber, oil, and other vital strategic materials from French, British, and Dutch colonies in the Pacific for Japan's industrial machine. With Europe at war, the Japanese figured that America was the only power that could stop them. So in a bold move, even as Japanese diplomats negotiated peace in Washington, Japanese troops steamed toward targets in Southeast Asia.
The Imperial Navy sent 6 aircraft carriers, 350 planes, and 24 support vessels more than 3,000 miles across the Pacific for the sole purpose of crippling America's Pacific Fleet. Their plan was to protect the shipping lanes between the resource-rich colonies the Japanese were about to conquer and would protect their home islands.
Japan's Prime Minister Tojo and his military advisors predicted that by the time America was ready to respond to their attack, Japan would be firmly in control of East Asia and could protect those acquisitions with a defensive ring of Pacific islands.
Shortly before 8 a.m. Sunday morning, December 7th, the carrier-based Japanese planes struck Pearl Harbor, America's Pacific stronghold. The raid lasted less than 2 hours and left 8 battleships and 13 other military vessels crippled or destroyed.
More than 1,000 Americans were wounded, and among the 2,403 killed was Rear Admiral Isaac Campbell Kidd Sr., who died on the bridge of the fleet's flagship, the USS Arizona.
The architect of the attack told the Japanese cabinet, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." America's Navy was caught with only 80 effective combat ships, 7 carriers, only 4 of which were in the Pacific. Japan operated 186 combat ships from bases protected by the ring of island fortresses throughout the Pacific.
America's immense economic and technological strength had been aimed more at consumers than soldiers. The largest forges in the country could make a car frame and a bathtub, but were too small for big guns. It would take time to refit and shift America's giant manufacturing plants and shipyards to the production of tanks, airplanes, and destroyers.
Japan's new domain now spread from the Pacific, the Aleutians, to New Guinea. The Japanese had conquered Hong Kong, Malaya, Thailand, forced the surrender of Bataan, and ended resistance on Corregidor in the Philippines. Japan placed new defensive bases in New Britain, the Solomons, the Marshalls, and the Gilbert Islands. More than 1.5 million square miles and 125 million people now fell under the rising sun.
By June 1943, the U.S. Navy had built 14,072 new seafaring vessels, 613 of them warships, and 18,269 planes. In that massive mobilization of America's industrial power, the USS Kidd was launched February 28, 1943, one of 175 ships built of the same design. The widow of Rear Admiral Kidd smashed the champagne bottle on the USS Kidd's bow.
The ship bears the number 661 because it was the Navy's 661st destroyer built since 1902. The Kidd is a Fletcher-class destroyer, deliberately built small, only 376 feet long, with a width of barely more than 39 feet. The Kidd was highly maneuverable and built fast, with a top speed of 36 knots, about 40 miles per hour.
In its arsenal of weaponry, 5 5-inch 38 caliber guns, 5 21-inch torpedoes, 14 40-millimeter anti-aircraft guns, and depth charges.
On November 11, 1943, the Kidd was in a task force escorting 3 major aircraft carriers between Rabaul, where Japanese Admiral Yamamoto placed 5 airfields and 100,000 troops to supply the chain of island fortresses, and the island of Bougainville. The Kidd veered from the fleet to pick up 2 downed American pilots. When 8 Japanese dive bombers tried to polish it off, torpedoes attacked from below. Robert H. Garwood, a turret gunner on a Grumman Avenger off the carrier Essex, was shot down during an attack on Rabaul. He tried to keep dying radio man Roy Don Bright afloat.
I told him to hang on because someone would come after us. I was watching as a couple of Japanese planes were shot down and hit the water. All of a sudden, I saw the USS Kidd come up on us from behind. I tried to swim us both over, but the ship's momentum was taking it past me, and I couldn't make the net. I saw a torpedo wake go directly under us, apparently for the Kidd.
Bill Cox was standing right beside the ship's captain on the Kidd.
It was running hot, straight and normal. Being a torpedo man, I knew exactly what that meant. It was going to blow us straight to hell. The captain couldn't hear me screaming at him, so I just pounded him on the back until he turned around and looked at me, and I pointed to the torpedo in the water. He immediately ran into the pilot house.
One torpedo went up the starboard side and the other went up the port side, but missed due to Captain Roby's quick action.
He stumped the ship dead in the water. He stumped the ship dead.
They thought we were moving forward or they thought we were moving aft. No idiot on a destroyer that size was going to be sitting still. So, consequently, they missed us fore and aft with torpedoes.
Mac Bradley was manning radar in one of the ship's nerve centers as the Kidd continuously fired on attacking Japanese planes and tried to pick up the men. Robert Garwood said he watched the ship leave a few times, but each time it came back.
They had to put a boat in the water because we couldn't get close enough to the people to rescue them.
Both pilots were recovered, and 3 enemy planes were shot down. The Kidd's skipper, Commander Alan B. Roby, won the Silver Star for gallantry.
When former crewmen return to visit the Kidd, they remark about how small it seems. And indeed, they were cramped with 300-plus men on board.
Darvin R. Lee left Pawnee, Oklahoma for the Kidd at 18. Robert Francis Walker of Los Angeles was a 17-year-old newlywed father. He had tried 3 times earlier to enlist, but was refused for being underage. Homer Hayes of Paris, Tennessee was 14 when Pearl Harbor was attacked and counted the days until he turned 17 and could enlist. Then 17-year-old boy Clement lived next to a cow pasture on what was then the outskirts of Baton Rouge. A gunner's mate, Clemens says he slept on the floor of this gunner's post for all 3 years on the Kidd. Not because he had to, but because it was cooler at night in the sultry South Pacific. And Clemens felt he was quicker on the trigger in case of enemy surprise. Clemens had enlisted in the Navy, hoping for adventure.
I said, man, I want to get on one of them fighting ships, like I told you. The man said, well, I got 9 of them. Which one do you want? The easy one I could spell was K-I-D-D. So I took the Kidd.
William T. Barnhouse was a student at the University of Texas in Austin, showing his son Gene the ship after all these years.
The memories of the actual combat are very vivid. The general 2 years of life aboard the ship are vague. They're clear.
A reserve officer, Bill Barnhouse, was a rookie.
I went aboard and reported to the captain, and he looked at me and he said, "How old are you, son?" And I said, "I'm 20 years old, sir." And he said, "Have you ever seen an ocean before you came out here?" And I said, "No, sir." And I'd seen the Gulf of Mexico, but I'd never seen an ocean. And he put his hand up like that, and he said, "My God, I didn't know the war was in this bad a shape."
The Kidd's first voyage across New York Harbor to the Brooklyn Navy Yards, Commander Alan B. Roby hoisted the Jolly Roger skull and crossbones from her foremast. The crew adopted the infamous 17th century pirate, William Kidd, as its mascot, and while the ship was being loaded, painted the English buccaneer's image on a smokestack.
The Kidd's first mission, a cruise around Newfoundland, then escort the USS Alabama through the Panama Canal and onto Pearl Harbor. Early on, the Kidd's pirate became the crew's reputation as well as mascot. Crew members began to ransom rescued pilots for ice cream mix and other delicacies from the larger, better provisioned aircraft carriers. We should point out this is a standard practice among destroyers.
This is my cabin. This is where I lived for 2 years.
Bill Barnhouse's cabin is still on display. He and his bunkmate could hear water rush by the wall beside their beds. They were sleeping right at the water line.
I wrote many letters home to your mother sitting right there because I wrote one every day, although I couldn't mail them but about once every 10 days.
Showing son Gene around, the memories all come back. Gene can finally see the red toilet seat in the ship's head.
They put these seats on them like that, and 3 men sit side by side. So much for privacy. That red seat is red because anyone with venereal disease is supposed to use the red seat. But the ship's doctor said that it's probably the cleanest seat in the whole toilet because nobody would sit on it.
Barnhouse's tour offers us a good chance to show you the ship's 20 and 40 millimeter rifles used for short-range firing, much like the distance you'll see from the ship to the Centroplex. Keep in mind the ship's big guns with 5-inch barrels could lob shots half a mile away, well past the TV tower. The 20 and 40 millimeters were reserved for when the enemy got close to the ship.
This is a twin 20 millimeter. The bullets are in here. These cases, one on either side, and you have a complete crew on this gun. You've got loaders, and you've got this man here is with this strap. He's strapped in. Takes a pretty good man to handle it. And he holds on to these, and he turns this gun physically this way. He's aiming at himself, and he's got his firing control lever over here, and he's pretty much on his own. His job is to line it up and fire. And when these guns were firing a lot, these barrels got real hot, and if the barrel got hot and the gun wouldn't fire, or you knew you needed to change barrels, you would come over here. Not this man, these would keep firing, but you'd have another crewman that would come over and take a spare barrel. And then they had to get this barrel out, and remember, it was extremely hot. And if you'll notice the threads on it, they had to get this one out and get the new one in and get the gun firing again. These are very effective guns, but very close range. When you hear these guns go off, you reach down and you tighten your safety life jacket, because when these go off, he's pretty close. And you know that if he's that close, he's very apt to hit you. These depth charges that we just came by are fired by a K gun or a Y gun. And the reason they call them that, they're shaped like a Y or a K, you know. And when I first came aboard, all depth charges were ash can style, a round can flat on either end. They didn't sink very fast, and they tumbled. They came out with this teardrop, which had fins on the back, and it went straight down, and it sunk a whole lot faster.
Step into the galley for a slice of ship's life. The food for the average crewman was, well, memorable. As Homer Hayes shows his son the ship, he can't really brag about the cuisine. He and others may have passed on the bread at times.
Well, the bread, we put the slices up to the light to see where the bugs are at. Then you just pick them out.
I just couldn't eat it because it was just nothing but weevils through the whole slice of bread. And I had a buddy aboard with me that would tell me that it wasn't Friday, so it was all right to eat it. That is, it wasn't Friday, so it's all right to eat meat.
We usually fed bacon and eggs on Sunday morning, because Sunday morning you could sleep in. That's why the Japanese raided Pearl Harbor on Sunday morning. They knew everybody was asleep. And so they would feed the best food they had on Sunday morning, because only about half the men got up to eat.
Lieutenant Barnhouse was in charge of the crews who kept the ship in top condition. His team often painted while in port, using whatever scraping tools they had, and then used the standard issue paint. Sometimes the ensigns were not all that excited about this job. When at one point the lieutenant had challenged his crew to paint the stern of the ship at top speed and had joined them on the scaffolds to paint, he received a message he was wanted in the captain's office.
He said, "We have so much problem with you reserve officers." Said, "You're not supposed to do the work. You're supposed to see that the men do the work." And I tried to explain to him how I was building up this competition and camaraderie to get it done. And he said, "That's just the trouble with you reserve officers. I don't know what we're going to do with you." And I said, "Well, sir, no disrespect, but the only reason that we're here is because you fellows, you regulars, can't handle it. And as soon as you can handle it, I'm ready to go home." Just like a skyrocket. He was so furious.
Though Barnhouse and others would find themselves on the bridge charting routes that would lead to rendezvous points, few, if any, knew what shifting positions meant for the rapidly changing war scene. The plans of attack were so secret.
But Fletcher destroyers usually worked in groups, guarding a larger carrier. Sometimes they were almost touching as a man was transferred from one ship to another. Mail was passed the same way. When in port, they might be lashed together in tight formation.
In the days before high-tech surveillance equipment, a destroyer's radar, placed in an outward perimeter around the carrier, could detect incoming attackers and engage the enemy before the carrier was even threatened. The USS Kidd was on such a mission on April 11th, 1945.
We was on picket duty, all the ships on the side of each other, you see. And we never did see a plane come for us. They always went to the carriers. And we was a ship that if they sent a torpedo at the carrier, we had to take that torpedo at the suicide. And just to save the big ship, you see. But that day he didn't go for the big ship.
American task forces had pushed the Japanese 3,000 miles back across the Pacific, one island at a time. Now the U.S. was invading Okinawa. It was just 500 miles from Tokyo. The Kidd was steaming less than 300 miles south of Japan, protecting the invasion from attack.
Japan filled the skies with kamikaze. Young pilots were told that becoming one with the bomb was to die honorably. The suicide pilot trained to ram Navy ships in order to place the bomb far below decks in the most vulnerable spot.
There were Japanese planes, we thought they were our covering fighters, having a dogfight right up in the sky here, and suddenly they all peeled off, and they were all Japanese. And this one peeled off at the black.
Lieutenant Shigehisa Yaguchi, 22 years old, is believed to have been in the cockpit of the plane which left with others out of Kanoya Naval Station in southern Japan. It's not known whether or not his final moments of flight were carefully planned, but the resulting flight could be one for military strategy lessons. The crew aboard the Kidd saw the Zero heading toward the USS Black, but it only strafed that ship with machine gun fire and kept heading toward the Kidd.
And he made a perfect torpedo run. We thought he was going to drop a torpedo. In fact, all the way in, I kept thinking he's going to drop a torpedo, but he didn't.
As the Zero moved between the ships, there was little the guns on the Black or the Kidd could do.
He come down and he was going to level off with the Black, but he went over the Black and then level off to us. So they couldn't shoot at us and we couldn't shoot at him. We did shoot him with 20s, but that's about all. And the 40s.
And he just kept coming full blast and hit right under the #1 stack.
Yaguchi crashed into the forward boiler room. The boilers exploded, killing every man in that compartment. The steam was near 800 degrees.
It was coming this way. The midship damage control party came around here. Same thing on the bridge to get away from where he was obviously going to hit. Well, he hit down below the main deck, went into the forward fire room, and came out about here. And the bomb went out about 25 yards and exploded and blew back. And when it did, it killed everybody along here. It killed the same number of ones that were on this side of the bridge, and that 40 millimeter, twin 40 millimeter on the front of the bridge. We had acetylene and oxygen tanks right here that the ship fitters used for welding, and they exploded.
Despite all the dead and injured, the Kidd was still under attack. The ship's captain was injured. The ship's doctor lost his eye. Officers were forced into trying to offer treatment.
Brought the wounded in here and stretched them out this way on this deck. And with just enough room between them where we could step over them like that. And we brought Darvin Lee in and stretched him out right here. And I gave him a shot of morphine. Each officer carried 5 vials of morphine on his belt. And we put him out here and I gave him a shot of morphine. The whole time he was just cussing and mad. He was mad. He wasn't crying from being hurt. He was mad at the Japanese. And he had about 50 wounds from shrapnel in him. And we stretched him out here, and after the morphine, I kept putting sulfur powder on his wounds. And he, when I could see that he wasn't going to make it, I picked him up in my arms, and he died. But,
Because the ship was built in airtight sections that were sealed as the crew headed to battle stations, water was kept in the major damage areas, and mattresses were stuffed into the holes so that the rest of the ship would not flood. The Kidd, though foundering, did not sink. Homer Hayes, who was a gunner, was suddenly handed a pump.
I don't know what we tried to do, but we bumping it. We tried to bump it out. It was chaos.
To this day, survivors remember the heroism. The chief petty officer, who, as water was gushing in the ship's hull, locked a door, wielded a pipe, and physically threatened panicking young men. He shook their fear and got the Kidd enough steam to move out of the battle zone. Quick action saved the ship from further attack. Another hit could have finished it.
The USS Kidd now rests along the Mississippi River as a testament to the crew's determination and sacrifice. The pirate, whose image had been covered up in late 1944, was restored to Stack Number 1 during repairs in San Francisco.
Fully repaired and ready for action in the imminent invasion of Japan's home islands, the USS Kidd was en route to Japan via Pearl Harbor, just days after the first atomic bomb struck Hiroshima, heralding the end of World War II. It returned to San Diego and was decommissioned on December 10, 1946, placed in the reserve fleet until such time as it would be called upon again.
Mothballed in 1946, it was recalled for Korean service and was active throughout the Cold War from 1951 to 1964. Placed in reserve, it was stricken from the Navy list of vessels in 1974. During its time in service, the USS Kidd earned a total of 12 battle stars, 8 for service in World War II and 4 for service in Korea.
38 crewmen died in the kamikaze attack. And though the battle was halfway around the world, the cause, many felt, was right here at home.
I would like to have the people who visit the ship leave with the idea that these 38 men that died on this ship on April 11, 1945, died in an effort to make America a better place to live. And I would like each person that visits the ship to come away with the thought that they could help the effort these men were making to try to make America a better place to live.